Well, interesting that when in Moroccan universities, you do have obviously the Sahrawis who are, both struggling in terms of their nationalist cause, but also on perceived discrimination. In some cases, they started to make common cause with Moroccans who want to open up their system as well. We saw a similar thing actually in Indonesia, where you had East Timorese students at Indonesian universities, making common cause with the people struggling against Suharto. And I think that's continuing, and I think as pro-democracy movements grow in Morocco, I think though for the first time there might be more open debate about the situation in the Sahara. Tindouf, there's been an interesting history there. I mean, there was a major pro-democracy uprising in the 89, 90, 91 in there against the Polisario leadership. The camps, on the one hand, there was a fair amount of a pluralism in civil society to a limit, in terms of some of the participatory democratic institutions, but the big decisions were always top down, and they had their own essential intifada, if you will, protests that were initially suppressed, but grew and maintained their nonviolent discipline, and led to the abolition of the Politburo, the establishment of the Independent Human Rights Commission. In fact, one of the leaders of that protest is now the Prime Minister of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. But it didn't, obviously didn't go far enough, and in certain areas there's been slight retrenchment in terms of liberties. We're starting to see more protests again, and it's fascinating to me because I don't know of any situation of an exiled armed liberation struggle where, when you did have dissent against the leadership, they engaged in nonviolent protests, and in some cases, though again not enough in my view, they've won some concessions, major concessions, and because in most cases, ends up they get a rival armed liberation group, or they end up shooting each other, or it gets really crazy. So I mean, I think there's a, but like the Palestinians, I think they see whatever issues they have with their own leadership, that still the main issue is the occupation, and that's still still the priority. But my view is the more democracy you have in Morocco, in Algeria, in the Polisario controlled camps, and anywhere else, the better.
It's widely claimed that the U.S. Told the Egyptian army that if they, open fire on people, like in Tahrir Square, for example, that they could no longer have the same relations with them, and that's why the military decided to push Mubarak out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if there's any truth?
Yeah, my understanding from my sources actually is indeed that was the word that came down. That for one thing, if U.S. weapons are seen engaging in that kind of massacre, you can imagine what it would mean in terms of the way U.S. is viewed in that part of the world. So it was very much on a very pragmatic level, not just a moral level, for the Obama administration to make it clear. But at the same time, I would argue that even without that, I don't think they would have gotten away with it, because again, I don't think the rank and file soldiers would have done so. If anything, they would have turned their guns on their commanding officers rather than shoot their own people like that. So the answer is yes. There's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that to the Obama administration's credit, that is exactly what they did. But I don't think that's the only reason why it didn't happen. I'm sorry. I just remember something that's important. I should have mentioned in response to your question. There's been there's a growing split in certain ways within the nonviolent resistance movement in the occupied Western Sahara and the Polisario. The Moroccan line is all these protests these are all Polisario agents, and some of the people in the movement are indeed clandestine members of the Polisario, but a lot of them are not, and especially since it's a younger generation largely that's come of age, since the Moroccan occupation, exile, and Polisario, in many ways, is a generational dispute. Polisario want to be the ones in charge of the whole movement, whereas younger people are saying, "Hey, you're not here. We're here. We're the ones who are suffering under occupation." And in fact, there were a number of occasions where the Polisario said, "Hey, you guys, cool it. We're in a sensitive, diplomatic period right now," and the youth are saying, "What do we mean? This is, we have this struggle here." And so I think in certain ways, just as the First Intifada and the Black Consciousness movement in South Africa, while they are willing to cooperate with the external movement as you are diplomatic representatives or whatever, there's this also sense that we don't want to take orders from you. This is our this is our struggle, and so and I emphasize this because sometimes both sides want to say it. You're either with the Polisario or with Morocco, but in fact there are also those who are just as dedicated to ending the Moroccan occupation and having a free, independent Western Sahara, but are increasingly distrustful of the Polisario leadership. And again, want to take leadership more into their own hands. Yes.
Sometimes there's, I suppose, a more Marxist structural view that might argue that you need a certain kind of class composition in order to support certain kinds of movement. Mm-hmm. How do you see the role of middle versus working class? Participation in these movements. I mean, do you need a class that has time on its hands to plot, to plan strategy, nonviolent strategy, and disseminate it? Because you need full-time activists.
Yeah, I mean, even most Marxist revolutions have been led by educated, middle-class people. And I think one could say there are certain advantages to this, but you got to have a much more diverse following if you're going to, or a movement overall, if you're going to make a difference. I mean, frankly, for me, that critical period when I thought, oh my God, they're going to win this thing, was when the unions, when labor joined. Was it third week or something? That was big. That was huge. And it was another reason why I predicted Egypt would be among the first to do this, because they actually have a industrial working class, which a number of countries in that part of the world don't. And of course, that especially if you want to do general strikes and kind of disrupt the system, people putting down their tools, not I think the classic Marxist or even anarchist idea of the power of workers ultimately to shut the system down is something that's very apparent. Again, that works better in a country like Egypt than a rentier state where you don't have much of an industrial working class. But you do need, again, while one can argue that there are certain advantages of having intellectuals or middle class people who can kind of evaluate the bigger picture, it's something you certainly can't do alone. Again, Tiananmen Square, which is almost exclusively a student thing, is a clear example of the limitations if you don't have a more expanded class base.
Yeah, because that's true. The working class did not actually join the student progress in China. A lot of people have argued that's the critical point of failure, that workers didn't join the students.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
After the deposition of Mubarak, did the Egyptians open the border crossing to Gaza?
My understanding is that they have. If someone knows more on this, please correct me. My understanding is that they have somewhat loosened the restrictions of what can and can't go in and out in terms of humanitarian goods. But things are still, they're still, they're not allowing people to bring in arms or components that could be used on military purposes. I think, though I think a more democratic Egypt is certainly going to be more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause overall. I think they're pragmatic enough to recognize that it, provoking Israel, either directly or via Hamas, would not be very smart. Yeah.
I want to ask about Syria. Maybe got the Hajj involved in this too. When is Syria finished?
In many ways, frankly, I'm a little surprised that Syria has gone as far as it has. And I think in part because the Assad regime has just really made a series of really stupid blunders so far. I mean, I think because they have a party, because they have a broader, somewhat broader social base. I mean, I think if they'd been smart, they could have. If they lifted the state of emergency like the first week instead of 2 days ago or whenever it was, for example, it could have really helped. But I think things have gone along. I mean, these uprisings are almost every corner of the country now, and they are getting more and more broad based. I mean, I think it's possible that if they got smart, they could enact a whole series of pretty major reforms. Since again, they have the infrastructure and to do this. But thus far I've overestimated their intelligence in terms of responding, and so I don't know what to predict at this point. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
I was gonna just kind of ask your opinion on. So I spent last summer about a month in Burkina Faso, West Africa. So I wasn't too surprised to hear the civil war on the Ivory Coast in this kind of current time. But about a week ago, there was a kind of uprising, the whole resituating of the army in Burkina Faso. And not even a year ago, I was there in a medical environment, and it seemed to be pretty stable.
Yeah.
Granted, massive poverty,
Mm-hmm.
alarmingly small elite class.
Mm-hmm.
But is violence contagious? Is this part of the ongoing?
No. I think it has more to do with the unique situation there. I think though we are seeing more nonviolent. I mean, in many ways, it seems more like almost a more elite struggle between various factions in the armed forces and other things. But we have started to see some protests creeping south in Senegal, in Djibouti. We've had some nascent movements even in Egypt and Eritrea already, which have been stirring up. So I think there can be something of a contagion effect, but in terms of success, it has a lot to do with strategy. I mean, people think somehow again think, well, they did here, we can do it there, but you can't. I mean, just like despite his best effort, Che couldn't replicate Cuba elsewhere in Latin America. Things can't. You got to think smart strategically. I mean, I'm a consultant for a group called the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict, and which helped support the workshop in Egypt and elsewhere. And occasionally, they'll have somebody, from some young guy from the Venezuelan bourgeoisie who will come in and say, "Hey guys, help us make a revolution in Venezuela like the other places," and it's like, I'm not a big fan of Chavez, but these guys are not going to lead it. I'm sorry, it's gonna. They're still a minority. They're still identified with the old elite. You need to have a broad base, movement. You got to work for years. It's not a magic pill that you can take and suddenly you're going to have, this massive struggle. Oh, before people start to leave again, can we circulate both first a sign-up sheet for my email list, and and have one ready for those who want the books if they run out before you leave. Yeah.